in our direction and danger close. So those are all things that are often left in the wayside, but are very important and have a huge impact on our event. Uh, so those are things that as a security professional, we want to work with our partners in planning an organization to get those things done off in the very forefront and take that into account into our event structure.
By the way, and if anyone has any questions, go ahead and post it in the chat and I'll let Giancarlo know. And in the end, we'll have plenty of time for more Q&A too. Would you like me to change the slide, Giancarlo?
Yes, ma'am. So I try to structure this in 3 pillars, 3 things that I like to get from my clients whenever somebody comes to me with an event to think about, because again, these are things that are often forgotten. When you think security, you think a huge umbrella of things. Staffing is probably your most important piece, because how you staff your event is going to dictate how your guests and how your artists and how your presentation goes. So very big thing is the purpose of the staffing. What is the staff going to be doing at your event? Are the staff just there to escort people? Are there staff there to control crowds? Do you have staff to direct people to their seats? Or do you need staff or security to screen people in because you have a certain level of security requirement for your event? What do you want your staff to look like? The way that our staff looks like at Hard Rock Stadium is not necessarily how you might want them to look at take like a James L. Knight Center. When you have a nice formal concert, you might want them a little bit dressed up. Or again, an example at Hard Rock Stadium, the staff that we have at our entry gates is wearing a polo shirt, but the staff that we have in a luxury club is wearing a button down with a jacket. So those are things that are all very important that are often left in the beginning of the conversation and come back at the end. And then at the end, it's a little bit harder for us as a security group to be able to accommodate for those things. Crowd managers in South Florida, Miami, and really across the nation, crowd managers are starting to come up. Fire departments require, per fire code, it's 1 crowd manager for every 250 attendees. Is that something that your fire department is asking you for? Is there a specific course that they're asking your staff to be certified through? And the reason why that's important is because the courses range from an hour to 40 hours of instruction. So if you engage with a security company and they take, for example, the Reedy Rescue course, which is of an hour, but your fire department is requiring them to take the IAVM course, which is 8 hours, that's something important for them to know ahead of time, because that way they can get the staff trained for you and get them going. And then having the right amount of staff. What happens when you overstaff or when you understaff? In the event security industry and in the staffing world in general, in order for you to be fully staffed, you have to be overstaffed. So what does that look like for you as an event planner for your event? Are you willing to cover, 2 or 3 overstaff? What happens if your provider comes in 2 or 3 understaffed? Do you want them to call somebody in right away and you're okay with them being 30, 40 minutes late? Is that something you just want to leave by the wayside? So very important points for you to hit when you're talking about staffing and when you're trying to work out and determine what you need, how many you need, and how you need them. Allison, you can go to the next one.
I actually have a question. So this fire departments, is this a new compliance requirement? And is it different per city that have more issues, like say Miami versus if you're in Lakeland? Well, that's new to me.
So that requirement is actually a National Fire Protection Agency requirement for large event gatherings. I believe where it kicks in is events over 500. Most fire departments should be requesting this information or some sort of sworn statement or declaration that, hey, yes, we have crowd managers on site and this is how many we have. I know, for example, at Hard Rock Stadium at our events, at NOMI Fest or a couple of events that I do, they'll ask to see certificates and they'll allow you to have capacity based on how many certificates are presented to them. So for example, for a 2,500 person event, you need to have 10 crowd managers. If you only present them 8 crowd manager certificates, they'll permit you for 500 people less. And this is a national thing that should be required by all fire departments, but some are stricter than others when it comes to that.
Interesting.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand. This is Lori Bockham, South Beach Jazz Festival.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question, and sorry I'm not on video, but not possible this morning after the festival just ending.
Okay.
I had a question on that because our festival, it's a combination of ticketed and free performances, um, some in multiple venues, and I know that our biggest ticketed venue, which is the Miami Beach Band Shell, they do that 250 per. But our free events on Lincoln Road have grown in number of attendees, as has our park performance, to at least 1,000 at any given time throughout the hours. And we have not yet been required for that. I only saw it recently, like going through the paperwork for the venue, that they do every 250, we pay for that crowd management. But
Yes.
is it possible for our free, they haven't asked for it, but I think I'd like my support team and volunteers for the free event to take one of these training classes? Is that, I mean, just for our own, I think it's a good idea. Is this something that you could send the information to Amanda so we know how to sign up for that and be prepared for next year?
Absolutely. And look, crowd management is not, it's not something that's just confined to security. Really, crowd management and crowd control and crowd managers is something that everybody at your event should know. Crowd management is simply put, is when everybody's running out, there needs to be some people that are cool, calm, and collected to direct people out and
Yep.
direct them to the places that we all want them to go. Because, well, the last thing we need is we have a panicked evacuation and people are running towards an area that's going to be a dead end, or running towards an area that they're locked in, or God forbid, running towards the danger. So that's where us
Right.
managers and everybody can come in and step in and do that. So yes, I can absolutely get that information over to Amanda so she can disseminate it out to you guys.
That would be great. Our free spaces, the fire department is more, we have off-duty police. The fire departments, because we don't enclose our free events, they're aware we're there, but we don't have any blocked in spaces. So that provides a little easier access for everybody to get out.
Yeah.
But especially this weather, and just because, these days, a bad guy can just walk into any public space, and we know that. So thank you for that. This is very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick example, recently we've had, think of Aventura Mall when somebody knocked over a trash can and everybody thought it was somebody getting shot. Something as simple as that can cause a panicked evac. And it's not something that that's necessarily thought about or planned about in the forefront, but it's something that's a very real and very possible scenario. It doesn't necessarily have to be that somebody's doing something nefarious. It could just be a sound that mimics something that will scare somebody or scare a group of people into thinking that it's something.
Great. I'll go to the next one, and we do have another question from Lonnie. She's asking, do music tours require a specific type of security? Do they specify security requirements in the contract? I'm going to guess yes, but I'll have you answer that.
So music tours, depending on the tour it is. So I know Rolling Loud has a security group that travels with them, and they'll pretty much look at the event venue, at the space and the layout for the event, and they'll determine what that is. But think of like a concert. The most recent one that we had here was Bad Bunny, or even Karol G. They have what's called a security rider, which is a document where the security or the tour security manager, tour security director will put together what they require. And that includes things like dressing room, stage security, back of house security, what they want those security to be doing, what happens when the artist needs to leave. I know one that we had here, Bad Bunny, where Bad Bunny got onto a tree and floated over the crowd. Part of that security rider is like, hey, if this system fails, this is what we're going to do. We're going to lower it into the crowd, and we need 25 security to circle that platform so we can get the performer off the platform and get him back to a secure spot. Drones, it has their drone policy, how they would like security to respond. So in short, the answer is yes, they usually will have something like that. If you are experiencing some of the smaller concerts, they'll rely a little bit more on the festival organizers to put that together. But most concerts and most artists and most traveling tours usually have something that they'll provide to you along the lines of, hey, this is what we're looking for. And then they'll leave the rest to you.
Awesome.
So jumping into the next section, communications. Communications is another one that I think that we often forget or even take for granted. Perfect example, Hard Rock Stadium, 63,000 people we had here this past weekend for the Bills game. Once we have 63,000 people here, even with T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, all the major carriers coming in, boosting their signal, doing all their things, communication is still very difficult to get through. And a lot of us rely on our cell phones for day to day. But when you're at an event and you have a high density of people in your event, cell phones aren't always the best solution. And that's where our handy dandy radios come in. Radios come in many different shapes, sizes, and capabilities. But one thing that's often forgot is, is the organizer, the festival presenter, the festival producer, are they providing radios, or is your security company providing radios? Who do you want to be on radio? How do you want them to communicate? What are you using your radios for at your event? Is it just for emergency communication? Is it for you to communicate with your front gates and saying, hey, we're ready backstage? One thing that we do here at Hard Rock Stadium, and we try to do it almost all our venues, is we try to get a sense from every department before we open and let people into our venue. Rolling Loud, for example, is a big one where, day of show, we're ready to open gates, and stage 1 or stage 2 is they're working on some lighting or some things and they have a lift. Do you really want to let fans into their festival site when you have heavy equipment on the site? So we utilize radios to check with every department and make sure that we're ready to go, or if not, that we're holding and we're communicating that information. Radios are extremely essential. Frequency deconfliction is a huge thing that I think is forgotten almost every single time. The most recent scenario that I have that I can give you guys is Formula One. Last year, Formula One deconflicted their frequencies, but somebody forgot. And that frequency that Formula One ended up using to communicate with their vehicles ended up being the same frequency that Miami-Dade Fire Rescue uses for their tactical channel. Miami-Dade Fire Rescue uses that channel for communications for fires, major incidents, and all that stuff. So Miami-Dade had a fire and they said, hey, okay, everybody move to tactical channel number 1. And when they went to go use that channel was completely unusable because Formula One had created interference in that channel. So think about it on that extreme scenario, but also think about it in a smaller scenario. Think about it at your event. There's weather coming. Now your channel is conflicting with another channel and you can't get a message out to your stakeholders that, hey, we have weather coming. We're going to prepare for a shelter in place, or we're going to prepare for an evacuation. That could potentially put you and your festival attendees in harm's way. Another thing to think about when you're considering radios and communication is what type of equipment do you need? There's radios that are radio to radio communications. There's radios that run on repeaters. There's radios that run on cellular network. And you might be thinking, why is that important? Well, if you're in an open park with no obstructions and no buildings to go through, radio to radio is great. But if you're communicating, say, like we do for DCC is in a 5K run, walk, bike that also has a 100-mile bike ride, 50-mile bike ride, 25-mile bike ride. So we use radios for that event. But, you can be communicating from the stadium with somebody that's 50 miles away. A radio to radio or a radio to repeater isn't necessarily the best solution for that because it's not going to work well. So that's where you bring in cellular radio. So, understanding your festival site, your layout, what is in the way of your communications, and relaying that information out to your provider or relaying that information out to your radio contact, very important. Another thing in communication is incidents. How do you want your incidents documented? We all know that we live in a world where everybody likes to, oh, well, I tripped and fell, well, now I'm going to sue. So if somebody trips and falls at your event, or if somebody loses an item, how do you want that documented? Do you want pictures taken? Do you want an incident report? Do you want to take the person's information? Very important. And then not only just documented it on site, but how is that information stored post-event for when something comes up and people come back at you 3 or 4 weeks later and trying to, to say, hey, this happened, but this isn't, maybe they tripped and fell because they were having too many drinks before they came to your event. And they say, well, I tripped on a wire that was there. It's very important for you on site in the moment as it happens to document, what was going on, what you saw, take pictures and save all that information. one thing that we like to use is a IMS system, is an incident management system that captures all that information for you. There's several different ones. Allison and SEI have a very good one that comes out of Motorola that they can use that can incorporate your radios and all your information all into one platform. So that's something to keep in mind when you're planning your communication and your post-event results.
Great. I don't have a question, but maybe Richard, you've had experience. You're usually in the command center at, say, the Hard Rock Stadium for Formula One or Ultra. Have you seen, do you want to share an experience where communication wasn't there or was there that you want to share with the group? They love the behind the scenes.
Well, I pretty much had the same shared experiences with Giancarlo because we work so closely together with all these events. But I can remember at a Rolling Loud one year, there was an incident where there was believed to be an assailant on the property with a knife. And then word spread, one person started running, and so did. If one person sees somebody running, they're going to start running too. They don't want to hang around to see what's going on. And there was the instance where patrons did not know where to run to, and they were running into dead areas, like Giancarlo said. So it's very important to have that communication and have the crowd managers in place and the proper people in the proper areas in order to prevent an event like that where people are running to dead spaces and not getting out in time and not getting to the appropriate exits. But it's just a little incident, nothing too major.
Thank you, Richard. Here, next slide. Giancarlo, hang on a second. And why are setting expectations so important, Giancarlo?
So expectations, I think, are probably the most important of the three. Obviously, we all work in very different environments. You, as a festival organizer, festival presenter, you're going to put on an event and you're going to engage in a company to provide your security, provide your crowd management. But nobody knows the event better than you yourself. I can come in and I can draw up security plans and I can draw up all these beautiful things. But at the end of the day, you know your crowd, you know your attendees, and you know what you're looking for. So communicating the expectations and how you want things handled to your provider is absolutely critical for that to play out the way you want it. Think of it as almost as customizing your security approach. Think of like a TSA. TSA is very strict. Take off your shoes, everything out of your bag, super strict screening, where you now scale it back and think of like a college football. There's college football stadiums that have 90,000 plus people that don't do any screening. You have to look at that and communicate that out to your provider so that your provider understands and can tailor the staffing and tailor the deployment and tailor the needs and the overall operation to your event and to your policies and to your needs. Procedures, how do you want people screened? How do you want access challenged? How do you want access controlled? Jazz in the Gardens is a perfect example that we have here at Hard Rock Stadium every year. Jazz in the Gardens tells us, hey, if this person has this credential, it means that they're in the city commission. They can do whatever they want, however they want, no questions asked. But then, we have other events where it's like, listen, it doesn't matter if your headlining artist wants to bring 3 people backstage. The headlining artist doesn't have that authority or that privilege. So you stop them. It doesn't matter what they say. You stop that person. You tell him, no, they can't do that. What's your procedure and how do you want that handled? Do you have a checklist? One thing that we like to do again is checklists. We like to go down the checklist and make sure that, guest experience, police, security, show, if it's a football game, to make sure that both teams are ready, make sure that the weather's ready, officials, what do you have in place to make sure that everybody is set and ready to welcome guests into your venue and into your space? Policy conflicts. Formula One is another big one. We have areas that are luxury, but then we have areas that are premium luxury. Everybody is held to a NFL clear bag policy, with the exception of the premium luxury guests. Their policy is an exception. So what happens when you have one of those guests coming to a regular gate that normally wouldn't allow it? How do you want us to handle that? Or do you just want to let all bags in? Is there VIPs that are exempt from these policies? How does that work for you? If you're engaging in screening at your entry, how do you want your screening to be handled? What are you looking to catch, or what are you looking to remove from your venue? Do you want airport style? Do you want event style? Do you just want like a quick check to make sure they don't have any weapons on them? Do you want to make sure that they don't have cell phones? A lot of events that are happening now, especially comedy shows, are events where they don't want people bringing in cell phones. So do you want your security to screen for that? And then a very big one that's always very controversial is bag policy. You know, how big of a bag do you want in your venue? Do you want the bag searched? Do you not want the bag searched? Should the bags be left in the car? You know, these are all things that are very important that are often negated or forgot about up until show. And then the biggest thing with bag policy and procedures is to make sure what is being communicated at, you know, at your ticket purchase point, at your email communications, because oftentimes we'll have something that's discussed amongst a discussion group in the planning party, but then what's communicated out to the guests is different. So then you end up with conflicting information, and that can create some friction at your entry points. And I saw we have a couple questions.
You had a question from Lainey asking, what about the security staff? Like, what are the requirements for that staff to be hired? And I think does it come down to the quality of the on-site staff? Did I say that right, Lainey?
Yeah, because you can have everything in place, but you have to make sure that you're, you know, if you're doing outside, like who are they hiring? You know, I've seen certain events that I was like, you know, I don't know if I'd be hiring that guy. So what are some of the requirements for these people to be hired?
So I'll start with some basic ones, and then I'll go into more in-depth ones. So the state of Florida requires all security officials, anybody working in security capacity, to have a state of Florida security D license. That D license goes to the state of Florida. You have to get fingerprints, background checks, and active background monitoring to the state of Florida. So if you have somebody that's presenting to your event with a valid security D license, then it's a very simple way for you to check to make sure that that's valid and that their license is actually vigilant or active. That guarantees you that the person that's working your event is not a criminal, hasn't been arrested, isn't currently under prosecution, passed a background check. Most companies pass a drug check. Our company goes a little bit further than that, and we do a 7-year criminal history check, and we do driving, and we do drugs, drug screening. So that's going to really, there's a basic standard for the state, but then there's a further standard to your event. I know that we have done 10-year history checks for people. It just depends on what you want, and that is something that you should absolutely be asking your security provider. Hey, what are your qualifications for these staff? Or even dictating. I mean, we had an event at Lone Depot Park, which is where the Marlins play, where they said, hey, we want all your staff, instead of 7 years, we want a 10-year history on them. And if something comes up in 10 years, we want them disqualified from working our event. So we went back and we took all the people working that event, and we got the authorization, and we ran checks for 10 years. So that's all stuff that you can customize and you can ask. And being in the industry, I will say, and I will acknowledge the fact that, you know, sometimes what you get is not necessarily you ask for, but there's a couple of factors that can play into that. The biggest one is, you know, what you're willing to pay the provider that'll ultimately pay the employee. You know, we all know that we can get staff for $12 an hour, and it's going to be real cheap and it's going to look real good financially, but we also have to keep in mind that there has to be a little bit of a give and take. You know, for us specifically, we like to base it off what the market rate is. So right now in South Florida, your average security guard is making anywhere from $16 to $18 an hour. So we put ourselves around the middle of that, $17 an hour, and that's the minimum that we'll pay any of our staff down here. And that factors a little bit into, you know, what they look like and what they present when it comes to your event. So going back a couple of slides, you know, what you want them wearing and how you want them looking. If you tell me that, hey, I want suit and tie staff, the staff that I'm going to pick for you and that I'm going to source and I'm going to send out to your event is going to be different than if you tell me, hey, I just want staff to just greet people at the entry gates, wearing polos and shorts. So that's all stuff that's important, that's communicated, and that helps us as a security provider provide you what you're looking for. You know, at the end of the day, more information is always better, and it's going to help us give you a better product at the end of the day.
Great, thank you, Giancarlo. We have another question from Amanda, and that is, do you recommend having a pre-event meeting for all volunteers and staff?
Yes and no. So I think pre-event, so the NFL does what we call a 100-minute meeting, which is a 100-minute security meeting where all the security stakeholders are involved. They do a medical meeting. I think meetings pre-event are extremely critical. Creating a one-sheeter of what's going on, of how, you know, we do one here where it's a one-sheeter that has all the wristbands, all the access, all the credentials for the day, any special movements, any special guests that are at the event, I think is great. But also from your organization standpoint, from your event organizers to your key stakeholders, I think it's also good to have a meeting. And it doesn't have to be super long. It's just, you know, a quick meeting, maybe an hour before you allow guests into the venue, where you guys all sit down and say, hey, you know, from a security standpoint, what's, you know, what do you have going on? Is there anything that you see out of ordinary? From a production standpoint, are you ready to go? Is there a sound check, video boards, everything good to go? Stage is safe, ballast tanks filled. Think of all those things. So pre-event meetings are great, but just keep in mind, the more people you add to your meeting, the more, I guess, diluted the product is going to be. I would say keep them into smaller groups of stakeholders. So we like to do one with all our supervisors for our gates. We do one with all our field supervisors, and it's super quick meetings. It's just to go over certain hit points. We usually try to keep it to 2 or 3 bullet points that we'll go over every event to make sure that we hit it, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thank you. I have a few more slides, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for everybody. A couple of things, and Giancarlo or Richard, feel free to pipe in, but some safety solutions behind the scenes. And I always like to say, you know, people, the walkie-talkies, the communication systems, security people, these are not the most expensive line items in your live event, but they are utilities and essential. So it's not one of those things you want to cut corners in. It's just so important to have. So we could see by, if you're going to hire a staff for $14, $15 an hour versus somebody $18 an hour, you're going to get a different quality person. And if you don't notice security, then everything went well, I think, right? I would think that's part of it. But also behind the scenes, just kind of want to, I think, you know, as a Motorola channel partner, I'm finding, and I'm getting these questions all the time now, is there's a lot of things behind the scenes. And let's take the Hard Rock Stadium, for example. We all know that we go to a football game or go to the Miami Opens or Cirque du Soleil, any of these events happening. There's so much orchestration behind the scenes, but what's making this a safe environment? And it probably is a little bit more intrusive than it ever has been. We know it's there. We want to know it's there. Look, I have children in public schools, Broward County Public Schools, and we know that that's some serious stuff. And we want to make sure we're going to a football game and everyone's safe. So there's so much. But today there's software, as Giancarlo mentioned, Orchestrate, which ties in the video surveillance, it ties in body-worn cameras, it ties in mass notifications, workflows, having the right concealed weapons detection today. So there's a slew of information, a slew of technology that's bridging, you know, being able to detect, to respond, then to communicate and analyze. So all of these things are happening because of a technology ecosystem coming together. I don't know if Richard, you want to chime in and say anything about any of these tools, or if anybody has any questions of these tools.
Well, yeah, just really quickly, if you think about it, we just had the Bills game on Sunday. And it was important to get a large number of people inside the stadium in a very short amount of time, right? So if you see the second tab right there on that safe events, it's concealed weapons detection. At the gates, where everybody enters, there's weapons detections, and you can staff that certainly with people, but it's going to take a while to go through bags and open up closed bags, you know, pat somebody down, whether you're wanding them or whatever. So Motorola has these technologies in place where they have concealed weapons detections, and you don't necessarily need to staff that with a person to detect a weapon. So I think that's very important when you're trying to get a large amount of people into a confined area in a quick amount of time. Giancarlo,
That's
you want to
Yeah,
piggyback off of that?
yeah, to jump in and tell that, think about it, also think about it from your fan and from your attendee experience. Do you want, we all know that security is a cost, security is not necessarily convenient, security is not necessarily fun. So when you're designing your festival and you're looking at your clientele, do you want security to be less invasive or do you want it to be more invasive? If you're opting to not use any weapons technology or any metal detection or any technology, you just want pat downs, it's going to end up being very invasive for your attendees. Whereas you can go open gates, which is what we use here. You can go super passive, which is a weapons detection system that we actually demoed here once. And the system, all it does is people are walking normally without any kind of security interaction, and the system is just constantly detecting for weapons. We live in Florida. Unfortunately, Florida, it has one of the largest weapon possessions per person in the country. So you might be seeing people, and to you, it might not look like they're carrying a weapon, but the way that weapons are so small these days, I mean, we have weapons that are almost as small as an iPhone. So having that technology present and having that technology active and working is a huge asset. And then determining how invasive or how non-invasive you want that to be is something that should always be considered.
it's interesting.
Piggybacking on some of these, another one of these is body worn cameras. We have a team here at the stadium that breaks up fights. Having body worn cameras to go back on a Monday morning when the person says, hey, they just came up to me and they just absolutely beat me senseless and now I'm in the hospital and stuff. Having a body worn camera to be able to go back and look at that and say, hey, that's not what happened. Our staff connected with you, you refused to leave, our staff grabbed you by the arm and took you out of the exit. And based on what we're seeing, we don't see where any harm or injury was done to you. You refused and you were belligerent, and they forcibly escorted you out. But there was no injury. They didn't beat you. They didn't hit you with sticks. They didn't push you down the stairs. Like, none of that happened. So that's having that information and having that technology and that evidence to back up and be able to fight back any claims is extremely critical, especially in today's day and age where everybody's looking for the quick settlement or to make a quick buck. Unfortunately, at the expense of our events, at our producers, at our security organizations.
Yeah. When I went to the FSU football game, it's amazing. Like, compared to the Miami Dolphins, the Hard Rock Stadium, you go through a different facility, but they barely wanded you at FSU, versus at the Hard Rock Stadium. You don't realize there's different systems you could go through that can look at hundreds of people going through a gate versus one by one. And as just an attendee, you realize the outcome and the success of the event is based on these little nuances. So it's quite extraordinary. Hang on a second. We're almost through. So if you guys, here's your chance to ask any questions, Q&A, open it up round robin to anybody want to show your screen. Thank you, Lonnie, for all your comments too, by the way. And if during this, anybody wants to do a free security consultation with Giancarlo, just fill out that link. I'll put it back here. I did earlier, and then we could set up a call too. But does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Oh, did someone else? Okay. So my question is, we did a presentation with Nancy from FMG once, and she mentioned that they collect everyone's cell phone numbers. And I know that cell phone can be difficult because I'm usually one trying to post stories and stuff, and it goes so slow and there's a lot of people. But they collect everyone's cell phones and they do text message marketing, right? So they market to them. But then they said it's very important at the event. So if something does happen, they can text everybody there. Do you think that is a good tactic, or? Because I know
So,
it can be like,
so let's scale this up. You know, let's scale this way up. So Formula One, 120,000 people on site at once. Say that we have a column of smoke coming from the westernmost side of the event. And if you're sitting at the beach club and you see smoke coming from the marina, you're going to think, oh, wow, something's really going on. You know, and after a while, people are going to start getting a little bit of panic and whatnot. So when you have that information and you're able to collect and you're able to mass communicate, what that does is you can broadcast and say, hey guys, there's a vehicle that's on fire on 27th Avenue, completely unrelated to the event. Everything is completely safe. Continue enjoying the race as you should. One that we had here is what we affectionately call at the stadium the barbecue, which is during the Patriots game last year. We had a couple of cars that caught on fire and it created a large column of smoke, and people started posting on social media to the point where the stadium team and the media team decided, hey, let's put something out. Let's make people calm. This game happened to be on 9/11. Let's put something out. Let's communicate to our fans. And we actually use the Dolphins app. Dolphins app has push notifications that we can get mass communication out to all our fans and attendees and say, hey, listen, this is an isolated incident. It has nothing to do with the event. Everybody is safe. You know, continue to enjoy the event as you're supposed to be. So yes, I think mass communication is extremely critical in how you communicate to your guests. Let's think of now the more gruesome, let's say in the event that there is a scenario where there is an active threat on site. You can tell people as part of your crowd management, your evac plan, you can broadcast a message to everybody saying, hey, you know, avoid the easternmost exit, stay to the west, or stay away from this specific area, go this way. So yes, mass communication, gathering information is extremely critical. Something that people don't know is when you connect to a Wi-Fi at a public area, there's a lot of information that's being collected from you. One of that information is heat maps and where you're moving to. With technology these days, we can even isolate where you are in geospace and follow you throughout the event space. And depending on integrations, you can integrate that to a camera, and you can have a camera find a cell phone signature within an event space to track somebody down. We use that for theft protection. So if we have somebody that we know that stole something and we can get a phone number, we'll get that information from that cell phone or from that area, or we'll see, okay, well, this happened in this area. Oh, look, that cell phone was going at 1 mile an hour. Now they're going at 2.5 miles an hour. So it looks like they're running. So let's follow that cell phone and see where it went, and we're able to track and sort that out.
I know they have license plate detection too before somebody comes in for the bigger stadiums. You know, you wouldn't necessarily doing for a temporary space, but you could do it for facilities that are permanent, of course, like a stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've all gone, if you go to Aventura Mall, anytime you drive into Aventura Mall, there's a license plate reader that reads your license plate and tells Aventura police if there's anything on your license. Sawgrass Mills has the same. I know the airports down here have the same technology. So, you know, again, that's a piece of technology that I'm sure very few people notice that it's there, but it's there, and it definitely is active and working and looking for people.
And if you know anybody needs it, we do sell that. Do you guys have any other questions? Usually you're a talkative group. All right, well, anybody?
I
So
think we asked and answered a lot of questions along the way too, so that was great.
thank you so much. I'm always amazed what I learn and what really happens behind the scenes to make something safe and successful. So, oh, Giancarlo put his email there. So if anybody wants to talk to him directly, or like I said, fill out that form, we could get some information to you, and you can have a powwow with Richard and Giancarlo to figure out some security for your next coming events. Thank you so much, Amanda, for having us. Debbie, it was great to put this together.
Yes, thank you all for presenting. This was such a great presentation. We did record it, so we'd love to put it like on our YouTube for resources for other people if you don't mind. And if you have the most updated slides as a PDF, we can share it with everybody here as well. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I think this was such a very important topic, so I'm glad you all came. I do just want to remind you that we have a creative happy hour coming up on January 22nd. It's an in-person happy hour at the Intercontinental Hotel with our partner, the Arts and Business Council. You can go on our website and sign up, and if you use GMFEA Comp, you can get a free ticket because you're a member. So I hope you will join us. And we have a lot of these every month, so come back, come to the next session, and we will see you soon with some big announcements about our conference too. So
Thank you.
Thank you. This was super helpful. Thank you.
thank you. Let me grab this slide deck. Okay. I'm gonna, perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna email everybody the slide deck that
You
attended.
know what, instead of doing that, I'll put it in a PDF versus, if someone was on the call right now, wanted it right away, but I'd rather set it up as a PDF so they're not on my, is that cool?
Yeah, just email me the PDF and I'll email it to everyone that came.
And then
And this
Amanda, you
is
should
great.
have, you should
Okay.
have the link you should have the link for the crowd manager training.
Oh, perfect. We'll email that to them as well. Thank you. This was awesome. I learned a lot. I'm glad
Yeah.
Lori came on. I feel like she got a lot of good information too.
Debbie, you mentioned Chuck Ackers.
Yeah, are you familiar with Chuck Akers? I know he does that for a lot of the municipalities. I don't know if it crosses over with what your security people need in terms of the crowd management designation. I know a lot of our members have been trained that way.
I haven't heard of him.
Okay.
So there's to give you like a quick little thing on that. So there's really two main ones that South Florida looks at. One is the International Venue Managers Association training, which is a little bit longer, and it's two-faceted. It's a venue manager and then venue staff. So that one breaks it off into two parts. One is an 8-hour part for the staff, and then the other one is a 40-hour for the trainer that can do that. And then the one that I sent you guys, which is a little bit easier, a little bit more straightforward, right to the point, which is the Ricky Rescue one. That's the one that we put most of our staff through. We have certain key members that take the longer one. And those are the ones that, like me and some other key people that, hey, if there's worst case scenario is an active threat, like we're the ones that are going to be putting ourselves in harm's way to get people out.
I think his course is a 4-hour course, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so it's probably a little bit, probably a little expanded on the Ricky Rescue one.
And he does talk about that, how it has to be renewed every 3 years. And it's, like you said, the 1 to 250 requirement for number of managers per crowd member.
Yeah, and some I know for us, for concerts, for example, they'll ask for certificates from the stadium as a whole and say, hey, we need whatever number it comes out to for whatever we're permitting. They'll say, hey, we need this number of certificates for us to permit you for this event. And some of the smaller stuff too, like we do some stuff in our Broward Parks, and they'll ask us, like we had a 10,000 person event, so we had to bring that number of certificates and present it before they got permitted and were allowed to host their event.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know we all have busy days, so we can let you go, but I just want to thank you again. That was awesome. We
That
really
was wonderful. I
time.
appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good-
you.
Thanks, Allie.
Bye.